Two orphaned twins find their childhood photo in a millionaire's wallet. They're shocked, but when they confront him, he says just 4 words that change everything. Is it you? What's the connection between these boys and the man with everything? And why has this secret been hidden for so long? This incredible story will uncover the power of family, redemption, and the lengths we go to find the truth. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Tristan Blackwood's corner office, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. He stood at the window, adjusting his perfectly pressed tie while gazing at the city sprawled beneath him. 50 stories below, people scurried about like busy ants, their lives a world away from his carefully controlled existence. "Mr. Blackwood?" Felicity Morgan's voice broke through his thoughts. "The board members will arrive in 30 minutes. Tristan turned to face his assistant, noting the stack of presentation folders in her arms. "Thank you, Felicity. Everything prepared?" "Of course." She placed the folders on his desk with practiced efficiency. "Though you seem distracted today, is everything all right?" He waved off her concern, reaching for his wallet to check the time on his gold pocket watch, a habit he'd maintained since his father gave it to him decades ago. As he opened the leather fold, a worn photograph slipped out, floating to the floor like an autumn leaf. Felicity bent to retrieve it, but Tristan was quicker. His fingers closed around the faded image, and for a moment, he found himself staring into familiar brown eyes. Ava Winters smiled back at him from the photograph, her dark hair catching the sunlight of a long-ago summer day. "Someone special?" Felicity asked softly. Tristan cleared his throat, tucking the photo away. Ancient history. The board meeting dragged on longer than usual, with Tristan struggling to focus on profit margins and quarterly projections. By late afternoon, his stomach reminded him he'd skipped lunch. He dismissed his driver and took his own car, seeking solitude. The small diner on 42nd Street wasn't his usual choice, but something drew him there. Through the window, he watched the evening crowd thin out while picking at a club sandwich he barely tasted. That's when he saw them. 2 boys, no more than 12, carefully checking the dumpster behind the restaurant. Their matching faces struck him first. Identical twins, with dark hair and sharp features that seemed oddly familiar. Despite their worn clothes and dirt-smudged cheeks, they moved with purpose, working together like a well-oiled machine. One kept watch while the other searched, their roles clearly long established. Tristan's hand moved to his wallet, fingers brushing against the old photograph. He pulled it out, laying it beside his plate. The resemblance hit him like a physical blow. Something in the curve of their jaws, the set of their eyes. "Would you like anything else, sir?" The waitress appeared at his elbow. "Those boys outside," Tristan began. "Oh, them." She sighed, shaking her head. "They show up most evenings. We try to help when we can, but they never stick around long enough to really talk to anyone." Tristan watched as the twins gathered their findings and disappeared down the alley. His Mercedes felt too quiet as he drove home, the photograph burning a hole in his wallet. The boys' faces kept appearing in his mind, overlapping with Ava's image until his head ached with questions he couldn't quite form. In his penthouse that night, sleep eluded him. He stood at his bedroom window, the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. The photograph lay on his nightstand, Ava's smile both accusation and mystery. 12 years had passed since he'd last seen her, roughly the same age as those twins. His heart pounded as connections began forming in his mind. Memories surfaced. Ava's last desperate phone call, his father's insistence that she was trying to exploit the family name, the private investigators who reported she'd left town. He'd believed it all, too focused on his career to question deeper. Now, staring at his reflection in the darkened window, Tristan barely recognized himself. The power suit, the corner office, the empire he'd built. It all felt hollow against the weight of 2 hungry boys searching through garbage on a cold city night. The next morning, Tristan drove through the city's aging neighborhoods, his usual confidence replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. The Mercedes felt out of place among the weathered buildings and cracked sidewalks. His eyes scanned every alley, every shadowed doorway, searching for two familiar faces. Felicity's voice crackled through his car's speaker system. "Mr. Blackwood, you have a meeting at 11? Cancel it," he said, his attention caught by movement near a rusty dumpster. "Cancel everything today." There they were. The twins worked methodically, one holding a torn plastic bag while the other reached into the dumpster. Their movements were practiced, efficient, the routine of survival. Tristan parked his car and sat for a moment, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out onto the cracked pavement. His Italian leather shoes crunched on broken glass as he approached. The Boulder twin, the one keeping watch, spotted him immediately. His young face hardened into a defensive mask. "We're not doing anything wrong," the boy declared, stepping between Tristan and his brother. "This is public property." Tristan raised his hands, trying to appear non-threatening. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to help." "We don't need help," the boy shot back, "especially not from some rich guy in a fancy suit." The quieter twin had emerged from behind the dumpster, clutching something small and silver in his dirt-stained hands. His eyes darted between his brother and Tristan, wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I'm Tyler," the Boulder twin announced, chin raised defiantly. "That's Toby, and we can take care of ourselves." Tristan's throat tightened at their names. "I'm Tristan," he managed. "Tristan Blackwood." Something flickered across Tyler's face. Recognition, perhaps? The boy's stance shifted slightly, his defiance giving way to intense scrutiny. Toby stepped closer, his fingers working nervously at the silver object. A locket, Tristan now saw. "We have a picture of our dad," Tyler blurted out suddenly, his voice wavering between accusation and hope. "He looks like you." The words hit Tristan like a physical blow. He watched, frozen, as Toby's trembling fingers opened the locket. Inside was a photograph, worn and creased but still clear, a younger version of himself, smiling beside Ava on a summer day long ago. "Is it you?" Toby whispered, his first words since Tristan's approach. Tristan stared at the image, identical to the one in his wallet. The same angle, the same smile, the same moment captured in time. His mind raced through calculations. 12 years, Ava's disappearance, the twins' age. The truth he'd never known crashed over him like a wave. Without a word, he turned and hurried back to his car, his polished shoes scuffing against the broken pavement. The boys' voices followed him, Tyler's angry shout, Toby's softer call. But he couldn't face them. Not yet. Not with this revelation threatening to shatter everything he thought he knew. Inside his car, Tristan gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The twins' faces swam in his vision, their features so clearly a blend of his and Ava's. How had he not seen it immediately? Their claim echoed in his mind, a truth too enormous to process. "He looks like you." In his top-floor office, Tristan sat at his desk, 2 photographs laid out before him. The first, weathered and creased from years in his wallet, showed him and Ava, young and in love. The second, carefully copied from Toby's locket, was identical. His fingers traced the edges of both images, comparing every detail. "Felicity?" he called through the intercom, his voice rougher than usual. "Could you come in here?" His assistant appeared moments later, notepad in hand. She paused at the sight of him hunched over his desk, his usual commanding presence diminished. "I need you to hire someone," Tristan said, not looking up. Discreetly. "A private investigator. The best you can find." Felicity moved closer, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. "Of course. What's the matter?" "There are 2 boys." He cleared his throat. "Twin boys. I need to know everything about them, their background, their connection to Ava Winters, and..." He swallowed hard. "And whether they could be my sons." Felicity's pen stilled on her notepad. "Your sons. Just find someone good, someone who can keep this quiet." He finally looked up, meeting her concerned gaze. "Please." After Felicity left, Tristan paced his office, unable to focus on work. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor as he wrestled with his thoughts. Finally, he grabbed his keys. The twins weren't hard to find. They had a routine, he discovered. Certain dumpsters, certain times. He found them behind a grocery store, Tyler keeping watch while Toby sorted through discarded produce. "I have a proposition," Tristan called out, staying a few steps back. Tyler immediately stepped in front of his brother. "We're not interested." "One night," Tristan said. "A safe place to sleep, clean beds, hot food, no strings attached." Toby peered around his brother. "Why?" "Because," Tristan struggled to find the right words, "because I need to know if what you said is true, and because no child should sleep on the streets." The twins exchanged looks, one of those silent conversations that only siblings so close could have. Tyler's jaw clenched, but Toby's gentle hand on his arm seemed to soften his resolve. "One night," Tyler finally agreed. "But we leave whenever we want, and we stay together." "Of course," Tristan nodded. "My car's around the corner. You can sit in the back, doors unlock from the inside." As they walked to his car, Tristan felt the weight of their scrutiny. He also noticed things he'd missed before. How Tyler walked with a slight limp, how Toby's coat was several sizes too big, how both boys moved with the wariness of those used to betrayal. While he drove, Tristan watched them in his rearview mirror. They whispered to each other, pressed close together despite the spacious back seat. He saw himself in Tyler's determined expression, Ava's gentleness in Toby's careful movements. The possibility that they were his felt both terrifying and somehow right. Part of him hoped the investigator would prove them wrong. It would be easier, cleaner, less complicated. But as he caught another glimpse of them in the mirror, saw how they clutched each other's hands when they thought he wasn't looking, he realized a deeper truth. He was afraid they were right. The elevator doors opened directly into Tristan's penthouse, and the twins stepped out cautiously. Their worn sneakers sank into plush carpet as they took in the sprawling space with wide eyes. "This is all yours?" Toby whispered, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering city below. Before Tristan could answer, Tyler darted toward a massive aquarium that dominated one wall. His sudden movement startled the exotic fish inside, sending them scattering in colorful streaks. "Please be careful." Ms. Dorsey emerged from the kitchen, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun. She eyed the boys' dirty clothes with barely concealed dismay. "Ms. Dorsey, these boys will be staying tonight," Tristan explained. "Could you prepare the guest rooms?" "Room," Tyler corrected firmly. "We stay together." While Ms. Dorsey bustled off, muttering about clean sheets, the twins continued their exploration. A crash from the living room made Tristan wince. He found Toby frantically trying to piece together a fallen crystal vase while Tyler stood guard. "I'm sorry," Toby stammered. "I just wanted to see if it was real." "It's fine," Tristan said softly, surprising himself with how little the broken vase bothered him. "Are you hurt?" The elevator chimed again, and Felicity stepped out clutching a manila folder. Her expression told Tristan she had news, but before she could speak, another crash echoed from the study. "I'll clean that up," Tyler called out quickly. Ms. Dorsey appeared in the doorway looking ready to quit. "Mr. Blackwood, perhaps the boys could sit still for just a moment?" Tristan nodded distractedly, following Felicity to his home office. "What did you find?" "Nothing concrete yet," she said, opening the folder. "But there are some interesting leads about Ava Winters. She disappeared about 12 years ago, right around the time—" A loud thud from the study interrupted her. Tristan hurried to investigate, finding Tyler examining his father's old mahogany desk while Toby picked up scattered papers from the floor. "Sorry," Toby said. "The drawer just fell out." Tristan moved to help, but something caught his eye, a yellowed envelope that had been hidden behind the drawer. His name was written on it in familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The twins watched as he began to read. "Dear Tristan, I've tried to tell you this in person, but your father's secretary won't let me through. I'm pregnant. Twins, the doctor says. I know you've been distant lately, and your father made it clear I'm not welcome in your life anymore. But these are your children, Tristan. They deserve to know their father, and you deserve to know them. Please, if any part of you still cares for me, call me. Ava. Tristan's voice cracked on the last words. He looked up to find both boys staring at him, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. You never called her, Tyler said, his voice thick with anger and hurt. I never got this letter, Tristan whispered, still staring at the paper in his hands. I never knew. Toby clutched his brother's arm. Mom used to cry sometimes looking at your picture. She said you were a good person, but something changed you. The letter trembled in Tristan's grip as the truth he'd been avoiding crashed over him. These weren't just any abandoned children. They were his sons. And Ava, the woman he'd never stopped thinking about, had been forced to raise them alone. The private investigator's preliminary report lay open on Tristan's desk, its contents making his stomach churn. Photos and documents scattered across the polished surface told a troubling story. She just vanished? Tristan asked, his voice hollow as he stared at the last known photo of Ava, dated shortly after the letter was written. According to our findings, yes, the investigator replied, pointing to a timeline. Ms. Winters withdrew all her money from her bank account, packed up her apartment, and disappeared. No credit card activity, no social security number usage, nothing. Felicity stood quietly in the corner, taking notes while keeping an eye on Tyler and Toby, who sat rigidly on the office couch. Their young faces had aged years in the past few minutes as they listened to the clinical description of their mother's disappearance. We had a home at first, Toby spoke up softly. Mom always made sure we were okay. But then one day she went to get groceries and she never came back. Tyler grabbed his brother's hand. We waited 3 days. The landlord kicked us out after 2 weeks. Nobody would help. They said we'd go into the system and get split up. Tristan's chest tightened. He reached for his phone, dialing a number he hadn't called in years. Gerald Matthews? Yes, it's Tristan Blackwood. I need to speak with you about my father's dealings 12 years ago. An hour later, Tristan sat across from his father's former lawyer in a quiet coffee shop. The elderly man's hands shook slightly as he stirred his untouched coffee. Your father, he had his ways of handling problems, Matthews said carefully. When he didn't want something interfering with his plans for you, he'd make it disappear. What exactly are you saying? Tristan's voice was dangerously quiet. Matthews leaned forward. There were threats made, Mr. Blackwood. Not directly from your father, of course. He was too smart for that. But his associates, they could be very persuasive when needed. The coffee cup in Tristan's hand nearly cracked under his grip. He threatened Ava? I prepared several documents during that time, non-disclosure agreements mostly, but there were other papers. Matthews paused, glancing around nervously. Let's just say Ms. Winters had good reason to run. Back at the penthouse, Tristan found the twins in the guest room, huddled together on the bed. Their posture reminded him of frightened animals, ready to bolt at any moment. Your mother, he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. She was protecting you. From my father. From his world. Tyler's jaw clenched. She used to jump at shadows, always looking over her shoulder. But she never told us why. We thought maybe she had bad people after her, Toby added. But she'd just say we needed to be careful, to stay hidden. Tristan stood abruptly, striding to the window. His reflection stared back at him. His father's son wearing his father's success built on threats and fear. The weight of inherited guilt pressed down on his shoulders. He turned back to his sons, and pulled out his phone again. Get me the investigator, he told Felicity, who had appeared silently in the doorway. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, I want Ava found, and I want to know everything my father did to her. The twins exchanged a look of cautious hope as Tristan made the call. Their mother was out there somewhere, and for the first time in years, they had a real chance of finding her. The private investigator's voice crackled through Tristan's phone speaker. Mr. Blackwood, we've found something. A woman matching Ava Winters' description is working as an art teacher in a small town under the name Sarah Bennett. Tristan's heart raced as he studied the grainy surveillance photo on his tablet. The woman had Ava's delicate features, though her once dark hair was now a light brown. She wore simple clothes and carried an easel under her arm. "Send me everything you have," Tristan instructed, his voice tight with emotion. Tyler lingered outside Tristan's office door, his ear pressed against the cool wood. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the mention of his mother's name had stopped him in his tracks. "Those contacts from the old days still have reach," the investigator continued. "Some of your father's former associates are watching the same channels we are. If we found her, they might too." "I won't let them near her." Tristan's voice hardened. "Or the boys. I'm dismantling everything my father built with dirty money, piece by piece." Tyler's breath caught in his throat. The mysterious shadows that had haunted their childhood suddenly had names. Dangerous people connected to the grandfather they'd never met. "Mr. Blackwood," Felicity entered with a stack of papers. "The first set of divestment documents are ready for your signature." Tyler slipped away from the door and found Toby in their room, sketching in a notebook Felicity had given him. "Mom didn't leave us," Tyler blurted out. "She was running from bad people, Tristan's dad's people." Toby's pencil stilled. "What?" "I heard them talking. There are still dangerous people out there, but—" Tyler's voice softened. "Tristan's trying to protect us. He's getting rid of his dad's old business stuff to keep us safe." The door opened and Tristan stood there, his expression gentle. "How much did you hear?" "Enough," Tyler admitted, lifting his chin. "You found Mom?" Tristan moved into the room and sat on the edge of Toby's bed. "We think so. She's using a different name, but we believe it's her." "Is she okay?" Toby asked quietly. "She appears to be. She's teaching art." Tristan's smile was sad but warm. "I promise you both. I'm going to bring her home, but I need to make sure it's safe first." The twins exchanged a look, years of street-learned wariness warring with desperate hope. "I'm selling off every company, every asset my father used for his illegal dealings," Tristan continued. "Felicity's helping me track them all down. Once those connections are gone, his old associates won't have any power over us." For the first time since arriving at the penthouse, Tyler felt his shoulders relax. "You're really going to help us find her?" "Yes." Tristan's voice was firm. "She's your mother, and she deserves to come home to her children without being afraid anymore." Toby put down his sketchbook and moved closer to his brother. "What if the bad people find her first?" "They won't," Tristan promised. "I have security teams watching over her from a distance. She's safe." The twins shared another look, but this time it held something new: trust. Tyler saw his own hope reflected in his brother's eyes. In his office later that evening, Tristan signed document after document, dissolving partnerships and selling off companies. Each signature felt like breaking another link in the chains his father had forged. "The first wave of sales is complete," Felicity reported, organizing the signed papers. "But Mr. Blackwood, some of your father's old partners are already asking questions." Tristan set down his pen. "Let them ask. I'm done living with my father's shadows." The morning sun cast long shadows through the glass walls of Tristan's office as he reviewed another stack of financial records. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but determination kept him focused. A sharp knock interrupted his concentration. Dominic Pierce strode in without waiting for permission, his expensive suit and silver hair marking him as someone accustomed to power. Felicity followed close behind, her worried expression telling Tristan she hadn't been able to stop their unwanted visitor. "Selling off your father's legacy piece by piece?" Pierce's smile didn't reach his cold eyes. "That's not very filial of you, Tristan." "My father's legacy was built on corruption," Tristan replied, standing to face Pierce. "I'm cleaning house." Pierce placed both hands on Tristan's desk, leaning forward. "Stop digging. Some doors are better left closed for everyone's safety." The threat hung heavy in the air. Before Tristan could respond, Felicity burst in. "The boys, they're gone. Security found this note." Tristan snatched the paper from her hand. In Tyler's messy handwriting, "Gone to find Mom ourselves, tired of waiting." Pierce's smile widened. "Sounds like you have more pressing matters to attend to." Tristan's heart pounded as he grabbed his coat. "Felicity, track their phones." Already on it, she replied, tapping rapidly on her tablet. They're moving east, toward the train station. They raced down to Tristan's car, leaving Pierce watching from the office window. The GPS signal led them through increasingly rough neighborhoods. Finally, they spotted the twins ducking into an alley. "Tyler, Toby!" Tristan called out, jumping from the car before it fully stopped. The boys froze, but before they could respond, 3 men emerged from the shadows. Their leather jackets and threatening postures screamed trouble. "These the kids Pierce mentioned?" one thug asked another. Tristan stepped between them and the twins. "Back off. Now." "Or what, rich boy?" The largest man cracked his knuckles. Felicity had already dialed 911. The sound of approaching sirens sent the thugs scattering into the darkness. Tristan turned to the twins, his relief quickly turning to anger. "What were you thinking? You could have been hurt." "We're tired of sitting around," Tyler shot back, though his voice shook. "While you play with paperwork, Mom's out there alone." Toby touched his brother's arm. "Those men knew Pierce's name. They were waiting for us, weren't they?" The color drained from Tyler's face as the reality of their close call sank in. "This is exactly why we have to be careful," Tristan explained, his voice softening. "Pierce and his people are dangerous. They've been watching us, waiting for a chance like this." Felicity ushered everyone into the car. "We need to get somewhere safe. Pierce's visit and this attack happening on the same day isn't a coincidence." "I'm sorry," Tyler mumbled, looking down at his hands. "We just miss her so much." "I know." Tristan met their eyes in the rearview mirror. "But we have to be smart about this. Pierce knows we're close to exposing everything, and he's getting desperate." As they drove back to the penthouse, Tristan's mind raced. Pierce's warning and the coordinated attack proved one thing. They were on the right track. But the danger to the twins was real and growing. "Felicity," he said quietly, "call the security team. It's time to move against Pierce's entire network. No more waiting." She nodded, understanding the stakes had just gotten much higher. In the back seat, Tyler and Toby huddled together, their earlier bravado replaced by the sobering reality of what they'd nearly walked into. The private investigator's call came just before midnight. Tristan paced his home office while listening, his free hand clutching the old photograph of Ava. Tyler and Toby sat on the leather couch, watching his every move with anxious eyes. "A small coastal town?" Tristan repeated, his voice tight with tension. "And you're certain it's her?" Felicity entered quietly, carrying a tray of hot chocolate for the twins. She set it down and stood near the doorway, concern etched on her face. "She's going by the name Sarah Mitchell now," Tristan said, still listening to the investigator. "Working as an art teacher." He scribbled the details on a notepad, his hand shaking slightly. Tyler jumped up, spilling his untouched hot chocolate. "Well, when are we going to get her?" "It's not that simple," Tristan began, but Tyler cut him off. "Of course it is. We know where she is now. What are you waiting for?" Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. "Unless you don't really want to find her?" Toby stood beside his brother. "You're just like before, aren't you? Too busy with your important business to care about Mom." "That's not fair," Tristan protested, but the accusation hit home. "I'm trying to protect you all." "Protect us?" Tyler laughed bitterly. "Where were you when we were sleeping in alleys? When Mom disappeared and we had nobody?" "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand," Tyler shouted, tears streaming down his face. "She waited for you. She told us stories about our wonderful father who would come find us someday. But you never came." Toby's quieter voice carried just as much pain. "She cried at night when she thought we were sleeping. She was all alone, scared, and you weren't there." Tristan sank into his chair, the weight of their words crushing him. "You're right. I failed her. Failed all of you." "Boys," Felicity stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "There's more to this story than you know." She turned to Tristan. "They deserve the truth. All of it." Tristan ran his hands through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted. "Pierce and his associates, they're not just businessmen. They're dangerous people who worked with my father. They threatened Ava, forced her to run, The twins fell silent, listening. I didn't know about any of it back then. My father kept me in the dark, made sure I was too focused on the company to notice what was really happening. Tristan's voice grew hoarse. But now that I'm dismantling their operation, they're desperate. If we move too quickly to reach your mother, we could lead them right to her. Tyler slumped back onto the couch. So we just keep waiting? No. Tristan stood, moving closer to the twins. Finding your mother is my top priority. But we have to be smart about it. We have to keep her safe. Keep all of you safe. Toby wiped his eyes. You promise? I promise. Tristan met their gaze steadily. We'll bring her home. Felicity smiled softly at the tentative peace settling over the room. The twins' anger hadn't fully dissipated, but understanding was beginning to take its place. The morning news hit like a thunderbolt. Tristan stared at the television screen in his office as headlines scrolled beneath Pierce's carefully composed face. Blackwood Empire built on corruption. Exclusive expose reveals decades of criminal activities. In the adjacent room, Tyler and Toby huddled on a couch watching through the glass walls as reporters swarmed the building's entrance below. Security guards held them back, but their cameras flashed relentlessly. This is our fault, Tyler whispered, his shoulders hunched. If we hadn't shown up. Toby nodded miserably. Maybe we should leave. Go back to the streets before we mess up his life completely. Felicity entered with a stack of newspapers, all bearing similar devastating headlines. She noticed the twins' distressed expressions and set the papers aside. Don't even think about running, she said firmly, sitting between them. This isn't because of you. Pierce is retaliating because Tristan's finally doing the right thing. Inside his office, Tristan's phone buzzed constantly with calls from panicked investors. The stock price was plummeting. Pierce had released documents showing money laundering, bribery, and worse, all tied to Tristan's father, but casting dark shadows over the current business. Mr. Blackwood, his PR team urged through the speakerphone, we need to distance you from these allegations immediately. Perhaps temporarily separate yourself from recent complications. Their meaning was clear. Distance himself from the twins. Tristan's jaw clenched. No, absolutely not. He strode into the room where Felicity sat with the boys. Their faces were pale with worry, but they straightened when he entered. We'll go, Tyler blurted out. We don't want to ruin everything for you. You're not going anywhere, Tristan said firmly. Pierce thinks he can force my hand by threatening what I've built, but he's wrong about what matters most now. Felicity stood up. We need to make a statement, get ahead of this narrative. Already working on it, Tristan replied, pulling out his phone. He dialed quickly. Yes, set up a press conference, 1 hour. The next 60 minutes passed in a blur of preparation. Felicity helped Tristan craft his statement while keeping the twins calm. When the time came, Tristan stood before a wall of microphones and cameras. My father built an empire through corruption and intimidation, he began, his voice steady. I inherited that empire, but I choose not to continue its legacy. Yes, dismantling these corrupt operations will cost me financially. Yes, some investors will leave, but I won't defend or hide from the truth. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. To those threatening my family to preserve their power, you will fail. I choose my children over any fortune. I choose doing right over doing what's profitable. The Blackwood name will stand for something better starting today. Within hours, stock prices fell further. Several major investors publicly withdrew. But as Tristan returned to his office, he found Tyler and Toby waiting with Felicity. Their eyes shone with a mix of gratitude and worry. Did you mean it? Toby asked quietly. About choosing us? Every word, Tristan replied, sitting down heavily in his chair. We're family now. That matters more than anything Pierce can take away. Felicity smiled warmly, and family sticks together. In his dimly lit office, Tristan read through the private investigator's report for the third time. His hands trembled as the pieces fell into place. The manila folder contained photos of Ava from years ago, showing her being followed by men in dark suits. Attached were transcripts of interviews with former employees who had witnessed threats being made. They cornered her in the parking garage, Tristan muttered, reading aloud. Told her if she ever spoke about what she'd seen in the accounting files, they'd make sure she disappeared permanently. Felicity sat across from him, her face pale. There's more, isn't there? Tristan nodded grimly. Pierce's men were involved, but they were following orders. My father's orders. Outside the office, Tyler and Toby crouched in the shadows of the hallway, straining to hear every word. They'd gotten good at sneaking around during their years on the streets, and right now, those skills were proving useful. Your father? Felicity's voice carried through the door. But why would he? Because Ava knew too much, Tristan replied, his voice thick with disgust. She worked in accounting. She must have seen evidence of the money laundering, the bribes, everything. Later that afternoon, Tristan met with one of Pierce's former associates in a quiet coffee shop. The man, nervous and sweating, confirmed what the report suggested. Your father couldn't risk her talking, the man explained, glancing around constantly. When he found out she was pregnant, well, that made her more of a liability. He told Pierce to handle it. Back at the penthouse, Tristan found the twins sitting in the kitchen, their faces hard with barely contained emotion. They'd heard everything. So it was your dad, Tyler said flatly. He's the reason Mom had to run. The reason we ended up on the streets. Toby remained silent, but his eyes glistened with unshed tears. Tristan sank into a chair across from them. Yes, my father destroyed your lives to protect his criminal empire. I can't change that past, but I swear to you both. I'll tear down everything he built if that's what it takes to make this right. Even if you lose everything? Toby asked quietly. Everything I have came from his corruption, Tristan replied. It needs to be dismantled piece by piece until there's nothing left for Pierce to hide behind. Only then can your mother come home safely. Felicity entered the kitchen, carrying her tablet. I've already started gathering evidence against Pierce's operations. Bank records, witness statements, everything we need to expose him. It won't be easy, Tristan warned. Pierce has powerful friends, political connections. We don't care about easy, Tyler declared, his jaw set firmly. We want our mom back. Tristan looked at the twins, these boys who'd survived so much because of his father's cruelty, and felt a surge of determination. Then let's get started. Pierce thinks he has power over us because of what he might expose, but we'll show him what real exposure looks like. Tristan's fingers flew across his keyboard, authorizing another sale of company assets. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his office as he systematically dismantled portions of his empire that had been tainted by his father's corruption. Each click felt like another nail in Pierce's coffin, another step closer to justice. That's the third subsidiary this week, Felicity noted, concern etched on her face as she adjusted her glasses. The board is in an uproar. They're threatening emergency meetings. Let them be, Tristan replied, his voice hard as steel. Every penny from these sales goes toward finding Ava and destroying Pierce's network. I won't let them stop me. The private investigator's latest report lay open on his desk, coffee stains marking its corners. New leads suggested Ava had been spotted in a small coastal town just 3 days ago. The trail was getting warmer, and Tristan's heart raced with each new detail. Tyler and Toby watched from the corner of the office where they'd taken to spending their afternoons after school. The twins exchanged worried glances as Tristan aggressively pursued another phone call, his knuckles white around the receiver. He's going to get himself hurt, Tyler whispered to his brother, pulling his knees up to his chest. Toby nodded, fidgeting with his locket, thumb tracing its worn surface. He's different now, angrier, like a storm about to break. Felicity approached the twins, speaking softly, her perfume carrying hints of vanilla. Your father's determined to make things right. Sometimes that determination looks a lot like anger, but it comes from love. The phone call ended with Tristan slamming down the receiver, making the desk rattle. Pierce's people are trying to block the sales. They're threatening our remaining investors with legal action and worse. Mr. Blackwood. Felicity stepped forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Maybe we should slow down. Take time to plan this properly. No, Tristan cut her off, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. The investigator says we're close, days away maybe. Every hour we wait gives Pierce more time to move her again. I won't let that happen. The private investigator arrived later that afternoon with updated information, his weathered face grave. Maps were spread across Tristan's desk as they plotted the quickest route to the coastal town, marking potential danger zones in red. We'll need to be careful, the investigator warned, tapping specific points on the map. Pierce has people watching transportation hubs, especially near the coast. They're not subtle about it either. Tristan nodded, studying the routes, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. We'll take back roads, travel under different names, whatever it takes. Dad, Toby spoke up, surprising everyone with the term he'd never used before, his voice trembling slightly. What if it's a trap? The word dad hit Tristan like a physical force, stopping his breath. He looked at his son, and saw genuine fear in those eyes that mirrored his own. We can't lose you too, Tyler added quietly, reaching for his brother's hand. Felicity stepped in, her practical nature taking charge as she smoothed her skirt. We'll need a solid plan, multiple escape routes, safe houses along the way, nothing left to chance. I've already started arranging them, she continued, pulling out her tablet with efficient movements. And we'll need to move quickly but smartly. Pierce won't expect us to find Ava if we appear to be busy dealing with the business crisis. It's perfect cover. Tristan looked at the twins, then back at the maps, his resolve strengthening. You're right, all of you. We do this carefully, but we do it soon. Within the next 48 hours. No more waiting. The private investigator pointed to a small bed and breakfast on the map, circled in blue ink. My contact swears she's staying there under the name Sarah Mitchell, working as a part-time artist in a local gallery. Sells seascapes mostly. An artist, Tristan murmured, remembering the young woman who'd once filled sketchbooks with beautiful drawings, her hands always smudged with charcoal. That's her. That's definitely her. The coastal village was a picture of serenity, with weathered buildings and salt-tinged air. Tristan parked their rental car, deliberately chosen for its ordinary appearance, across from the small diner where his investigator had tracked Ava. Remember, he told the twins in the back seat, we need to be careful. Your mother might be scared at first. Tyler and Toby nodded, their eyes fixed on the diner's entrance. Through the large front window, they could see waitresses moving between tables with practiced ease. That's her, Toby whispered, pointing to a slim woman with auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun. She moved gracefully between tables, filling coffee cups and taking orders. Tristan's heart clenched. Despite the years, he'd recognize her anywhere. The same gentle smile, the same careful way she carried herself. They entered the diner, choosing a booth with a clear view of the door. Minutes ticked by as they waited for Ava to approach their table. When she finally turned toward them, order pad in hand, the color drained from her face. Sarah? Another waitress called out. You okay? Ava, using the name Sarah, backed away, shaking her head. I can't. I have to. Mom! Tyler couldn't contain himself any longer. Both boys scrambled from the booth, rushing toward her. Tyler? Toby? Ava's voice cracked as she looked at her sons, now so much taller than when she'd last seen them. How did you… Her eyes darted to Tristan, filling with fear and anger. Please. Tristan stood slowly, keeping his distance. We just want to talk. The boys need you. We can protect you now. Protect me? Ava's voice was barely a whisper. You have no idea what Pierce is capable of. I left to keep them safe. Mom, please. Toby grabbed her hand, tears streaming down his face. Come home with us. We missed you so much. Tyler joined his brother, clutching Ava's other hand. Dad's different now. He's fighting against Pierce. He's been taking care of us. Ava's eyes widened at the word Dad, looking between her sons and Tristan. The other customers were starting to stare. Let's talk outside, she said finally, leading them through the back door into a small alley. Pierce will never stop, she warned, though her resolve was clearly cracking as she held her sons close. He knows too much about what your father did, Tristan. about all the illegal operations. I know, Tristan replied. That's why I'm dismantling everything, selling it off piece by piece. I'm not my father, Ava. I want to make this right. The twins pressed closer to their mother, their earlier bravado replaced by quiet desperation. Please come home, they begged in near unison. Ava looked down at her sons, then back at Tristan. Years of fear and loneliness warred with the love she felt for her children. Finally, she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Okay, she whispered. Okay. But we have to be careful. Pierce has eyes everywhere. They helped Ava gather her few belongings from her small apartment above the diner. Within an hour, they were heading back to the city, taking different routes than they'd used to arrive. The drive was quiet, filled with soft sniffles from the back seat where Ava sat between her sons, holding them close. Tristan caught glimpses of them in the rearview mirror, his heart aching for all the years they'd lost. When they finally arrived at Tristan's penthouse, Felicity was waiting with security personnel stationed throughout the building. She'd transformed the guest wing into a comfortable space for Ava, complete with an easel and art supplies. Welcome home, Felicity said warmly, but Ava's response was tempered with worry. Pierce won't let this stand, she warned, even as she held her sons closer. He never has liked losing control. The first evening in the penthouse felt surreal. Ms. Dorsey had prepared a feast, but Ava barely touched her food, watching the twins devour their plates with a mixture of joy and sadness. They've grown so much, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. After dinner in Tristan's home office, the weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Ava paced near the window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. I wrote to you, she said suddenly, turning to face Tristan. Every month for a year. You never responded. Tristan sat at his desk, confusion etched on his face. What letters? I never received anything from you. I begged you to help us, Ava's voice cracked. The boys were just babies. I explained everything about Pierce, about your father's threats. Tristan's face darkened as understanding dawned. My father. He must have intercepted them. He pulled open his father's old desk drawer, retrieving the single letter he'd found earlier. This is the only one I ever saw, and I just found it recently. Ava's hands trembled as she took the worn envelope. There were dozens more. In the living room, Felicity sat with Tyler and Toby, helping them fill out school enrollment forms. The boys kept glancing toward the office, worried about their parents' conversation. Your mom and dad need time to sort things out, Felicity explained gently. Let's focus on getting you both back in school. What subjects interest you? I like art, Toby said quietly. Like Mom. Math, Tyler added. And science. But we're probably really behind. We'll get you tutors, Felicity assured them, whatever you need. Back in the office, Tristan stood up abruptly. We need to expose Pierce, show everyone what he and my father did, make them pay for separating our family. No, Ava's voice was sharp with fear. You don't understand. Pierce has connections everywhere. One wrong move and… We can't hide forever, Tristan insisted. The boys deserve better than living in fear. Felicity knocked softly before entering. I might have a solution, she said, closing the door behind her. We gather evidence quietly, build an airtight case. Meanwhile, we focus on getting the boys settled, establishing normal routines. Pierce will notice I'm gone from the diner, Ava worried. Let him, Felicity replied. We've already arranged top-tier security. The penthouse is safer than most government buildings. While you're protected here, we work smart, not fast. Tristan and Ava exchanged looks. For the first time, they found themselves in agreement. The boys come first, Ava said firmly. Tristan nodded. We move carefully, build our case, but we don't back down. I'll coordinate with the security team, Felicity said. We'll need to arrange safe transportation for school, establish emergency protocols. School? Ava interrupted, panic flashing across her face. Mom? Tyler called from the doorway where he and Toby had been listening. We want to go. Please? Toby stepped forward. We'll be careful. Promise. Ava looked at her sons, then at Tristan and Felicity. Years of running had taught her to trust no one. But seeing the hope in her boy's eyes, she knew something had to change. "Okay," she said finally, "but we do this together. All of us." Felicity smiled, pulling out her tablet. "I've already drafted a preliminary plan. Let's review it as a family." They gathered around Tristan's desk the first time they'd all worked together toward a common goal. It wasn't perfect. Tension still simmered beneath the surface, but it was a start. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as two armed security guards conducted their routine sweep, their practiced movements reflecting years of training. Ava watched them from the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold, her fingers tracing the ceramic rim nervously. "Something doesn't feel right," she murmured when Tristan joined her, his presence both comforting and concerning. "The security team is top-notch," he assured her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Ex-military, thoroughly vetted, each one personally interviewed by me." But Ava shook her head, her artist's eye for detail making her particularly observant. "It's not that. Yesterday at the grocery store, I could have sworn someone was following us. And this morning, there was a car parked across the street for hours. Dark blue sedan, same driver the whole time." In the living room, Tyler and Toby sprawled on the couch, absorbed in their new phones, a gift from Tristan that Ava had initially protested, worried about their safety and the expense. "Look how good this turned out," Tyler said, showing his brother a photo he'd taken at breakfast. The image captured their newly reunited family. Ava smiling genuinely for the first time in years, her eyes crinkling at the corners, Tristan looking at her with gentle concern, the twins beaming with matching grins. "We should post it," Toby suggested, excitement lighting up his face. "Show everyone how happy we are now. Maybe some of our old friends from the shelter would like to see it." Without thinking twice, Tyler uploaded the photo to his social media account, tagging their location with teenage enthusiasm. Hours later, Felicity burst into Tristan's home office, her face pale and her usually composed demeanor shaken. The boys posted a family photo online. It's already been shared hundreds of times. The comment section is filling up fast. Tristan's blood ran cold. "Take it down. Now. Get our IT team on it immediately." But the damage was done. That evening, as darkness fell over the city, casting long shadows across the penthouse floors, the head of security radioed in from the lobby. "Sir, we've spotted someone suspicious circling the building. Dark sedan, tinted windows. They've passed by 3 times in the last 20 minutes. Ava's hands shook as she helped the twins pack emergency bags, something she'd done countless times before, a routine that broke her heart each time. "I knew this would happen. We should never have—" "This isn't your fault," Tristan interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts with determined purpose. "I'm done letting Pierce terrorize this family. It ends tonight." "What are you going to do?" Felicity asked, watching him grab his coat, her fingers clutching her tablet tightly. "End this tonight." His voice was steel, tempered by resolve. "I'm meeting with some former board members who've agreed to testify against Pierce. With their statements and the evidence we've gathered, we can finally bring him down." "Dad, no," Tyler pleaded, the word dad slipping out naturally for the first time, his voice cracking with emotion. "It's too dangerous. We can't lose you." Toby clutched his brother's arm, his fingers digging into Tyler's sleeve. "We just found you. Please don't go." The security radio crackled again, static mixing with urgency. "Second suspicious vehicle spotted on the east side. Black SUV, no plates, moving into position." Tristan looked at his family, Ava's worried face lined with years of fear, the twins' frightened eyes wide with concern, Felicity's concerned frown deepening. He'd lost them once through his father's deception. He wouldn't lose them again to Pierce's threats, not when they were finally whole. "I have to do this," he said firmly, his jaw set with determination. "Pierce won't stop unless we stop him. He's never known when to quit." "Then we do it together." Ava stepped forward, squaring her shoulders with newfound strength. "I've spent years running. I won't run anymore. Not from him, not from anyone. Felicity pulled out her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. I've compiled everything we have on Pierce. Financial records, witness statements, photos, even some security footage. We just need those board members' testimonies to complete the case. It's all here. The security radio buzzed once more, urgency clear in the guard's voice. Sir, the vehicles are converging near the parking garage. They're moving with purpose. Tristan squared his shoulders, his decision made. He would face Pierce, but not alone. Not anymore. This time, he had something worth fighting for, something worth winning for. The private investigator spread dozens of documents across Tristan's mahogany desk. Bank statements, property deeds, and surveillance photos created a paper trail of corruption stretching back decades. Pierce has been clever, the investigator explained, pointing to a series of transactions. But he got sloppy recently. These shell companies all lead back to him. Ava leaned forward, her finger tracing a familiar name on one of the documents. I remember this company. When I was working at that cafe in Oregon, men in suits would come in every Friday. They'd talk about moving money through here. Tristan watched her closely. You gathered quite a bit of intel while you were hiding. I had to, Ava said softly. Knowing their patterns kept us safe. This man here, she tapped another photo. He used to work directly under Pierce, always carried a briefcase full of cash. Felicity, who had been quietly taking notes on her tablet, looked up. What if we use all of this? Not just in court, but in the court of public opinion. What do you mean? Tyler asked from where he and Toby sat in the corner listening intently. A press conference, Felicity explained. We lay out everything. The money laundering, the threats, the witness intimidation. Make it too big for Pierce to sweep under the rug. Ava's face paled. He'll retaliate. Men like Pierce don't take public humiliation well. Exactly, Tristan said, understanding dawning in his eyes. If we do this right, he'll have no choice but to respond. And when he does, he'll make mistakes, the investigator finished. Toby spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. Mom's right, though. He might hurt someone. That's why we need to be strategic, Felicity said, pulling up a draft press release on her tablet. We release the information in waves. First, hints to trusted reporters. Then, the press conference with irrefutable evidence. Ava studied the documents again, her years of vigilance showing in her careful analysis. These three men, she pointed to several photos, they're the weak links in Pierce's organization. I've seen them argue with him, question his decisions. We can approach them first, Tristan nodded. Offer immunity in exchange for their cooperation. The investigator gathered the documents into neat piles. I can have everything organized by category. Financial crimes, witness intimidation, corporate fraud. Make it impossible to ignore. A press conference, Tristan repeated, testing the weight of the decision. It would force everything into the light. Ava wrapped her arms around herself, a habit from years of self-protection. Once we do this, there's no going back. We'll need to be ready for whatever Pierce throws at us. We'll have security, Felicity assured her, and the media attention will actually help protect us. Pierce won't be able to move against us without scrutiny. Tyler and Toby exchanged looks, their twin bond evident in their silent communication. We want to help, Tyler announced. Absolutely not, Ava and Tristan said in unison, sharing a brief smile at their parental synchronicity. The press conference is in 3 days, Felicity said, checking her calendar. That gives us time to prepare everything properly. Tristan looked at each person in the room, his family finally whole but still in danger, and his trusted allies ready to help bring Pierce down. The decision settled in his chest, heavy but right. Let's do it, he said. Let's end this. The hotel's conference room buzzed with anticipation as reporters filled every seat. Camera flashes created a constant strobe effect while Tristan approached the podium, his steps measured and deliberate. The manila folder in his hands contained years of corruption, neatly organized into damning evidence. Good morning, he began, his voice steady. Today I'm here to address serious allegations about criminal activities within Blackwood Enterprises. The room fell silent as Tristan methodically laid out the evidence. Bank statements appeared on the screen behind him, followed by surveillance photos and internal memos. Each piece revealed another layer of Pierce's criminal empire. These documents show systematic money laundering through shell companies, Tristan explained, pointing to highlighted transactions. But more importantly, they demonstrate a pattern of intimidation and violence against those who tried to speak out. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked rapidly as reporters scribbled notes. Then, a familiar figure pushed through the back doors. Dominic Pierce strode down the center aisle, his expensive suit pristine, his smile cold. "How convenient," Pierce called out, his voice carrying across the room. The prodigal son, trying to wash his hands clean by blaming others for daddy's sins. Tristan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Pierce reached the front of the room. "Let's be honest here," Pierce continued, addressing the reporters directly. Tristan Blackwood was involved in every decision his father made. This theatrical display is nothing but a desperate attempt to save his crumbling empire. The reporters turned their cameras between the two men, sensing the growing tension. Some began shouting questions, creating chaos. Then a clear voice cut through the noise. "I'd like to speak." Ava stood from her seat in the front row, her face pale but determined. She walked to the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she took the microphone. "My name is Ava Winters," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. 12 years ago, I was forced to flee with my unborn twins because of threats from Mr. Pierce and his associates." The room fell completely silent. "I worked as a waitress in dingy diners. I changed our names. I taught my boys to always check for exits in any room they entered." Ava's voice cracked slightly. "All because Mr. Pierce made it clear that if I ever revealed what I knew about his operations, my children would pay the price." Cameras flashed frantically as tears rolled down Ava's cheeks, but she wasn't finished. "I wasn't the only one. There were others. Employees who discovered irregularities, witnesses who saw too much. Mr. Pierce made them all disappear, one way or another." Pierce's confident smile had vanished. He stepped forward, attempting to interrupt, but the reporters were now focused entirely on Ava. "Show them," she said to Tristan. "Show them the photos of the others who tried to speak up." Tristan clicked to the next slide. Face after face appeared on the screen. People who had vanished after threatening to expose Pierce's crimes. The evidence was undeniable. Pierce's composure cracked. His face reddened as reporters began shouting questions at him instead of Tristan. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "You can't possibly believe—" But the tide had turned. Reporters pressed closer. Cameras pointed at his increasingly flustered face. Pierce backed away from the podium, straightening his tie with shaking hands. "You'll regret this," he hissed as he pushed past Tristan. "All of you." The threat hung in the air as Pierce stormed out of the conference room, leaving a wake of whispers and camera flashes behind him. The morning after the press conference, Tristan walked into his office to find destruction everywhere. Papers littered the floor, furniture was overturned, and his computer lay smashed on the desk. Spray painted across his wall in bold red letters were the words, "You're dead." Security footage showed 3 masked men breaking in during the night. They moved with purpose, clearly sending a message rather than randomly vandalizing. On his desk sat a single envelope containing a photo of Tyler and Toby walking to their new school. Tristan's hands shook as he called to double the security detail around his family. But Pierce's men were already moving. That afternoon, as Tyler and Toby left their tutoring session at the community center, 2 black SUVs squealed to a halt beside them. The twin security guard immediately pushed them behind him, drawing his weapon as men in dark clothes emerged from the vehicles. "Run!" the guard shouted, engaging with the would-be kidnappers. Tyler grabbed Toby's hand and they sprinted down the alley just as Tristan had drilled them to do. Their hearts pounded as footsteps echoed behind them. Years of living on the streets had taught them every escape route, every hiding spot. They ducked through a narrow passage between buildings, scrambled over a chain-link fence, and finally reached the safe house Tristan had prepared. When Tristan brought them home, Ava was waiting. Her face was white with fury and fear. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she screamed, hands trembling. "You promised they would be safe. You promised Pierce couldn't touch them." "Ava, Tristan started. No, you didn't listen when I said he was dangerous. You thought your money and your security teams would be enough. Tears streamed down her face. He almost got our boys today. Our boys, Tristan. Tyler and Toby huddled together on the couch, the fear from their close call still evident in their eyes. Felicity, who had rushed over when she heard about the incident, stepped between Tristan and Ava. Stop, she said firmly. This is exactly what Pierce wants, to divide us, make us turn on each other. She's right, Toby spoke up quietly. When we were on the streets, Tyler and I only survived because we stuck together. Ava's anger deflated slightly as she looked at her sons. She sank onto the couch beside them, pulling them close. Pierce is escalating, Felicity continued. We need to be united now more than ever. Each person in this room has something to contribute. Ava's knowledge of his operations, Tristan's resources, the twins' street smarts, my organizational skills. Together, we're stronger than Pierce. Tristan moved to sit beside his family, his expression grave. I underestimated him, he admitted. I thought exposing him would be enough. But you're right. He's more dangerous than I realized. So what do we do? Tyler asked, his voice small but determined. Tristan looked at each face in turn, his sons so brave despite their fear. Ava, fierce in her protective love. Felicity, steady and wise. He knew then that they needed something more than evidence or security guards. They needed a plan that would end Pierce's threat once and for all. Tristan sat in a dimly lit conference room at the police station, surrounded by detectives and FBI agents. Maps and surveillance photos covered the walls, all centered on Dominic Pierce's operations. We've been building a case against Pierce for years, Detective Rodriguez explained, pointing to various photos. But witnesses always disappeared or changed their stories. Your evidence finally gives us something solid to work with. Ava shifted uncomfortably in her chair. He has people everywhere. How can we be sure this won't backfire? Because this time we're setting the trap, Tristan replied, laying out documents on the table. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, everything we've gathered, it's all backed up and ready to go public if anything happens to any of us. Back at the penthouse, Tyler and Toby paced restlessly, while Felicity coordinated with security teams. We should help, Tyler insisted. We know how Pierce's guys operate on the street level. We've watched them for years. No way, Tristan said firmly. You've both been through enough. Your job is to stay safe with extra security at the lake house. But Dad, Toby started to protest. The word Dad still made Tristan's heart skip a beat. He knelt down to their level. Listen to me. The best way you can help is by staying protected. I can't focus on taking down Pierce if I'm worried about you two. Over the next few days, Tristan and the authorities gathered more allies. Former employees who'd been threatened by Pierce came forward. Local news stations agreed to be positioned strategically. Even some of Pierce's own men, sensing which way the wind was blowing, offered to turn state's evidence. Ava worked with the FBI, mapping out Pierce's network from her years of observations while in hiding. Her hands trembled as she marked locations on their boards, but her voice remained steady. He'll have backup plans, she warned. Multiple escape routes, offshore accounts, fake identities ready to go. That's why timing is crucial, Felicity added, reviewing the operation schedule. We need to hit everything simultaneously. His properties, his accounts, his associates. No warning, no chance to run. The private investigator brought in his final report, adding another layer of detail to their plan. His weak point is his ego, the investigator noted. He won't be able to resist responding to a direct challenge. Tristan nodded grimly. Then that's what we'll give him. A chance to try and destroy me publicly, except this time, we'll be ready. As they finalized the details, Ava pulled Tristan aside. Are you sure about this? If anything goes wrong? It won't, Tristan assured her, though his own heart raced at the risks. We have to end this, Ava. For our family. For all the families he's hurt. The next morning, Tristan watched as Tyler and Toby reluctantly packed for the lake house. Their faces showed a mix of worry and frustration at being sent away. Promise you'll be careful, Toby said, hugging Tristan tightly. Promise you'll come get us when it's over, Tyler added. I promise both, Tristan replied, holding his sons close. This will all be over soon. The salty breeze whipped across the empty dockyard as Tristan stood alone near an old shipping container, his expensive suit offering little protection against the chill. Moonlight reflected off puddles from the morning's rain, creating eerie shadows between the stacks of cargo boxes that loomed like silent sentinels in the darkness. His heart pounded against his ribcage, but his face remained calm, years of business negotiations serving him well. A black SUV pulled up, its headlights cutting through the misty air, followed by two more vehicles that boxed him in. Dominic Pierce stepped out, flanked by four burly men in dark suits, their bulging jackets betraying concealed weapons. His expensive leather shoes clicked against the wet concrete as he approached, each step deliberate and threatening. Really, Tristan? This cloak and dagger meeting? Pierce's voice dripped with mockery, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. Your father would be disappointed. My father's disappointment means nothing to me anymore, Tristan replied evenly, standing his ground. Pierce circled slowly like a predator sizing up its prey, his men spreading out in a practiced formation. Come now. We both know how this works. Your father understood the value of keeping certain arrangements private. He was a practical man. Like forcing a pregnant woman into hiding? Tristan's voice hardened, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. Threatening her to protect your crimes? Is that what you call practical? Business is business. Pierce shrugged with casual indifference, pulling out a handgun that glinted dangerously. Speaking of which, I assume you called me here to make a deal? From her position in a nearby surveillance van, Felicity monitored the conversation through Tristan's hidden microphone, her fingers hovering nervously over the communications equipment. She glanced at Ava, who sat rigid beside her, listening intently, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of her seat. Actually, Tristan said, a hint of steel entering his voice, I called you here to give you a chance to confess. Pierce laughed, the sound echoing hollowly across the dockyard. Confess? To whom? To them. Tristan nodded slightly, his signal clear and precise. Suddenly, floodlights blazed to life around the dockyard, turning night into day. FBI agents and local police emerged from behind containers like ghosts materializing from the shadows, weapons drawn and steady. Pierce's men reached for their guns, panic flashing across their faces. I wouldn't, called Detective Rodriguez through a megaphone, her voice authoritative and sharp. You're surrounded. Pierce's face contorted with rage, the mask of civility crumbling away. You're just like your father, after all, a traitor when it suits you. No. Tristan stood straighter, his shoulders squared. I'm nothing like him. He chose power over family. I'm choosing what's right. What's right? Pierce spat, spittle flying from his lips. Your father built an empire. We protected you, groomed you, gave you everything. And this is how you repay that legacy? That legacy was built on threats, corruption, and destroyed lives, Tristan said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent dockyard. It ends tonight. Pierce raised his gun with trembling hands, but before he could fire, two officers tackled him from behind with practiced efficiency. His henchmen surrendered as more agents closed in, their resistance crumbling. The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed across the dockyard like a final punctuation mark. As Pierce was led away, his expensive suit now dirty and rumpled, he shouted back at Tristan, You're making a mistake. Everything your father worked for. My father was wrong, Tristan cut him off, his voice firm and resolute. And so were you. Detective Rodriguez approached Tristan, nodding in approval, her badge catching the floodlights. We got his confession on tape. With the evidence we already had, he won't see daylight for a long time. Tristan watched as Pierce and his men were loaded into police vehicles, their faces masks of defeat. Years of corruption, threats, and fear, finally ending in a single night. He felt the weight lifting from his shoulders as the last car drove away, its red taillights disappearing into the darkness. In the surveillance van, Ava let out a shaky breath, tears of relief gathering in her eyes. Felicity squeezed her hand supportively as they watched Pierce being taken away through the monitors, the screens casting a blue glow over their faces. The nightmare that had haunted them for so long was finally over, dissolving like morning mist in the sunrise. At the press conference podium, Tristan stood tall, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. His hands gripped the edges of the podium, drawing strength from its solidity. Today, I stand before you not just as a businessman, but as someone who acknowledges the pain my father's empire has caused. Cameras flashed in rapid succession as he announced the creation of the Phoenix Relief Fund, dedicating millions to helping those who had suffered under his father's and Pierce's schemes. In the front row, Ava sat with Tyler and Toby, their faces glowing with pride. The boys sat up straighter, their matching dark suits making them look older than their years. This fund isn't about erasing the past, Tristan continued, his gaze sweeping across the packed room. It's about building a better future, one that honors truth and justice. After the announcement, a small group gathered in the old boardroom where Tristan's father had once ruled. The mahogany wall seemed lighter somehow, as if freed from decades of dark decisions. The twins watched intently as Tristan signed the final documents dissolving the last corrupt holdings, his pen moving with purposeful strokes. "Is that really it?" Tyler asked, peering over the desk, his finger tracing the edge of the papers. Toby picked up one of the papers, handling it with careful reverence. "All those bad things, they're really gone?" "Yes," Tristan smiled, ruffling their hair with both hands. "Everything clean and honest from now on. That's my promise to you both." Ava stepped forward, placing her hand on Tristan's shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "You did good today. Really good." Several former victims of Pierce's operations shared their stories, each one making Tristan's heart heavier with the weight of his father's sins. Their voices trembled with emotion as they recounted their experiences. But as he listened, Felicity appeared at his side, her presence steadying him like an anchor in rough seas. "You're not responsible for their pain," she whispered, her hand finding his and squeezing gently. "But you are responsible for making it right. And you are. Every single day." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a current of understanding and affection that filled the space. The twins noticed immediately, exchanging knowing looks and barely contained grins. "Mom," Tyler stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, his voice full of mischief, "I think Dad's got a crush on Felicity." Toby elbowed his brother hard but couldn't hide his own gleeful grin. "They're always making googly eyes at each other. It's kinda gross but kinda nice too." "Boys," Ava tried to sound stern, but her smile gave her away completely. She watched as Tristan and Felicity blushed deep red, stepping slightly apart but not letting go of each other's hands, their fingers still intertwined. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, warming the room as the last of the visitors shared their gratitude and filed out. The family gathered near the window, looking out over the city skyline that stretched before them like a sea of possibilities. "What happens now?" Toby asked softly, leaning against his mother, his small hand finding hers. "Whatever we want," Tristan answered, his arm around Felicity's waist, his voice full of quiet joy. "No more running, no more hiding. Just us, moving forward together." Tyler pretended to gag dramatically at their affection, but his eyes sparkled with happiness. "As long as we're together, right? That's what matters most?" "Together," Ava agreed warmly, pulling both boys close against her sides. "Always together." They stood there, bathed in golden sunlight, finally free from the shadows that had haunted them for so long. The city stretched out before them, a canvas ready for their fresh start, their second chance at being the family they were always meant to be. The Winter's Hope Foundation's launch event transformed the grand ballroom of the city's finest hotel into a beacon of promise. Banners bearing the foundation's logo, a simple house with a rising sun, hung from crystal chandeliers casting gentle shadows across the marble floors, while dozens of social workers and potential partners mingled with donors. The air buzzed with excitement and possibility. Tyler and Toby darted between guests in their new suits, their shoes clicking against the polished floor as they shared their stories with an earnestness that touched everyone they met. "We lived in that alley for months," Tyler explained to a philanthropist, pointing to a photograph in the presentation, his voice steady despite the painful memory. "Now other kids won't have to. We'll make sure of it." Toby, usually the quieter twin, found his voice when speaking about their mission. "Everyone deserves a chance," he told a group of social workers, his eyes bright with conviction. "Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them first. We know because someone believed in us." At the art display section, Ava stood before her newly completed painting, her first in years. The canvas showed two small figures huddled together in the rain, while warm light spilled from an open door nearby. Her hands trembled slightly as guests praised her work, each compliment helping to wash away years of forced silence. "I forgot how much I loved this," she whispered to Tristan, who stood proudly beside her, his hand ghosting near the small of her back in silent support. "During those years running, I couldn't risk being noticed. Art was too visible, too memorable. Even picking up a paintbrush felt dangerous." "Your talent never went away," Tristan replied softly, his eyes fixed on the powerful image before them. "It was just waiting for the right moment, like everything else in our lives." Felicity moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her tablet tucked professionally under one arm, as she coordinated with staff and answered questions about the foundation's initiatives. She had thrown herself into the project, working late nights with Tristan to ensure everything was perfect, her dedication matching his own. "The foundation will provide immediate shelter services," she explained to a group of potential donors, her voice warm and passionate, "but also long-term support, education, job training, mental health resources. We want to break the cycle completely. These children deserve more than just survival." Near the stage, a wall displayed photographs of homeless youth, their stories written beneath each image in careful, respectful detail. Tristan watched as his sons led small groups through the exhibit, explaining how the foundation would help kids just like them. Their confidence made his chest swell with pride. "Mom's painting should be bigger," Tyler announced, returning to where his parents stood, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "It tells the whole story without any words. Everyone stops to look at it." Toby nodded in agreement, fidgeting with his tie. "Maybe we could have an art program too, for kids to express themselves, like how Mom does?" "That's actually a wonderful idea," Felicity chimed in, joining them with a warm smile. "Art therapy could be very healing. We could create a safe space for creativity." Ava's eyes lit up at the suggestion, years of suppressed passion breaking free. "I could teach," she said softly, then more confidently. "I could really teach. Help other children find their voice through art." Tristan watched his family, yes, including Felicity now, as they bounced ideas back and forth, their energy infectious. The wounds of the past weren't gone, but they were healing, transformed into something purposeful and good, like paint creating beauty from darkness. The twins pulled Felicity away to show her another potential donor they'd charmed, their enthusiasm impossible to resist, while Ava turned back to explain her painting to an interested art collector. Tristan observed it all, his heart full with the knowledge that his family wasn't just surviving anymore. They were thriving and helping others do the same. The foundation wasn't just about giving shelter, it was about giving hope, one family at a time. The morning sun streamed through the trees as Tristan's car pulled up to the iron gates of their new home. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Tyler and Toby, who pressed their faces against the windows, eyes wide with wonder. "Is this really it?" Tyler asked, his breath fogging the glass. "This is home," Tristan confirmed, pressing a button to open the gates. The car rolled up the curved driveway, revealing a beautiful two-story house with warm brick walls and large windows. Unlike the stark modern lines of the penthouse, this place looked lived in, inviting. Ava sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. After years of tiny apartments and constant moving, the sight before her seemed almost unreal. The twins burst from the car the moment it stopped, racing across the front lawn. Their laughter echoed across the property, as they discovered a massive oak tree perfect for climbing. "Come on," Tristan said softly to Ava. "There's something I want to show you first." He led her through the front door, past the spacious living room with its cozy fireplace, and down a short hallway. Opening a door, he stepped aside to let Ava enter. The room's northern wall was almost entirely windows, flooding the space with natural light. Easels stood ready in one corner while built-in shelves held art supplies. A small sink for washing brushes was installed along another wall. "Your studio," Tristan said simply. Ava covered her mouth with her hands, tears welling in her eyes. She walked slowly into the room, touching the pristine work surface of a large table. "Mom!" Toby's voice carried from outside. "Mom! Come see the backyard." Wiping her eyes, Ava followed the sound of her son's excitement. The backyard stretched out before them, complete with a garden space and enough room for the boys to run freely. "Can we get a dog?" Tyler called from across the lawn. "Please?" "We'll talk about it," Tristan laughed, watching his sons explore their new territory. A car door closed behind them, and Felicity approached carrying a box of housewarming supplies. "I brought some essentials to get you started," she said, smiling warmly. "Felicity," the twins shouted in unison, running to greet her. "Hey, Felicity," Tyler said with a mischievous grin. "There's plenty of room here, you know. You should just move in too." Toby nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, then you could help us convince Dad about the dog." Tristan and Felicity's eyes met briefly before both looked away, blushing slightly. Ava noticed the exchange and smiled knowingly. "Well," Felicity said, recovering smoothly, "I'll definitely be visiting often enough to help with the dog campaign." They spent the rest of the morning exploring the house together. Each bedroom had its own character, and the kitchen was spacious enough for family meals. The basement held potential for a game room, which sent the twins into elaborate planning mode. Throughout the day, Ava kept returning to her studio, adding little touches and arranging supplies. Each time Tristan passed by, he found her standing in the light from the windows, looking more at peace than he'd seen her in weeks. The twins eventually convinced everyone to sit on the back patio, where they could watch the sunset through the trees. Felicity had brought sandwiches, and they shared an impromptu picnic as the day wound down. "So," Tyler said between bites, "when are you going to ask Felicity on a real date, Dad?" Tristan nearly choked on his sandwich while Felicity turned bright red. Ava couldn't help but laugh at their reaction. The late summer breeze carried the sound of children's laughter across the sprawling backyard. Colorful blankets dotted the grass where families gathered for the Foundation's first community picnic. Tyler and Toby darted between groups, making sure everyone had drinks and snacks, proud to help host at their new home. Near the patio, beneath a white tent, stood several covered easels. Ava fidgeted with the edge of one canvas, her heart racing as she waited for the right moment. Tristan noticed her nervousness and squeezed her shoulder gently. "They're going to love them," he whispered. When most of the guests had settled, Tristan clinked his glass for attention. The crowd quieted, and all eyes turned to him. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice warm and sincere. "A year ago, I wouldn't have imagined hosting a gathering like this, but two remarkable boys changed my life." He gestured to Tyler and Toby, who beamed with pride. "And today, we have something special to share." Ava stepped forward, her hands steady now. "Art was my escape, my way of holding on to hope during dark times," she said. "These paintings are for everyone who's ever needed to believe in better days." One by one, she unveiled her works. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Each canvas told a story of resilience, a sunrise breaking through storm clouds, children holding hands in a circle, a small plant growing through concrete. The colors were vibrant, alive with possibility. The final painting showed two small figures standing beneath a massive sky full of stars, their faces turned upward. Everyone recognized Tyler and Toby's silhouettes immediately. Spontaneous applause erupted, and several people wiped away tears. Tristan stepped forward again, waiting for the applause to settle. "In honor of the courage I've witnessed, not just from my sons but from so many of you, the Foundation is launching the Winter Scholarship Program." He looked at Tyler and Toby with pride. This program will provide education and housing support for homeless youth, ensuring no child has to choose between survival and dreams. The twins rushed to hug their father, nearly knocking him over in their excitement. The crowd cheered, and several teenagers in the audience exchanged hopeful looks. As the gathering returned to its casual atmosphere, Felicity found herself standing beside Tristan, watching the scene before them. Children played tag on the lawn while parents chatted over lemonade. Ava was surrounded by people asking about her artwork, her face glowing with renewed confidence. "Look at what you've built," Felicity said softly. "What we've built," Tristan corrected her, taking her hand. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Felicity. You saw the good in me even when I couldn't see it myself." Their fingers intertwined naturally, comfortably. Neither needed to say more. The journey from lonely office meetings to this moment of shared joy spoke volumes. Tyler and Toby, never missing a chance to tease, started making heart shapes with their hands whenever they caught sight of their father and Felicity together. Ava noticed and smiled knowingly, giving the boys a playful wink. The afternoon sun painted everything in golden light as the Foundation's beneficiaries shared stories, hopes, and dreams. What had started as a simple picnic had become a celebration of second chances and new beginnings. The grand ballroom of the newly established Winters Foundation sparkled with elegant lighting and hopeful energy. Community leaders, benefactors, and families filled the space, their attention focused on the stage where Tyler and Toby stood behind the podium, looking small but determined in their matching suits. Tyler cleared his throat first. "A year ago, we were digging through dumpsters for dinner." His voice trembled slightly, but he pressed on. "We didn't know where we'd sleep each night, or if anyone would ever care about two street kids." Toby stepped closer to his brother. "But someone did care. Our dad found us even though he didn't know he was looking." He glanced at Tristan, who sat in the front row between Ava and Felicity, his eyes glistening. "Being homeless isn't just about not having a place to sleep," Tyler continued. "It's about feeling invisible. Like you don't matter to anyone." "That's why this foundation matters," Toby added, "because every kid deserves to know they're not invisible, that someone cares." The twins shared a look before finishing together. "Thank you for helping us make sure no other kid has to feel alone like we did." The audience rose as one, applause thundering through the ballroom. Several people dabbed at their eyes with napkins. Tristan stood, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. These brave, resilient boys were his sons. His legacy wasn't in steel and glass buildings anymore. It was in their strength, their compassion, their determination to help others. Ava squeezed his hand, her own tears falling freely. She wore a deep blue dress that matched her eyes, her head held high. One of her paintings, the one of the twins under the starlit sky, hung prominently in the entrance hall, setting the tone for the Foundation's mission. As the applause continued, Felicity leaned close to Tristan. "So," she whispered with a playful smile, "when are you going to make an honest woman of me?" Tristan's face flushed red, but his eyes sparkled as he looked at her. Before he could respond, Tyler and Toby bounded off the stage and crashed into their parents for a group hug. Later that evening, their car wound through the city streets. Tristan sat behind the wheel, with Felicity beside him. In the back seat, Tyler and Toby were already half asleep against their mother's shoulders. Ava hummed softly, stroking their hair. At a red light, Tristan pulled out his wallet. Inside, where the old faded photograph of Ava had once sat alone, there was now a new family photo, all of them together, laughing in their backyard. The contrast struck him. The lonely man he'd been clutching a single memory versus the father and partner he'd become, surrounded by living, breathing love. The light turned green, and Tristan drove on through the glittering city, not as the cold millionaire in his glass tower, but as the head of a family built on second chances and unconditional love. If you enjoyed the story of Tristan, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.